Hi everybody, today we're going to talk about arpeggios. We often practice our arpeggios with our scales, and in the past we've talked about our scales being like musical broccoli. And if that's the case, then arpeggios are like musical cauliflower. They are just as important, they are just as good for you, but they're a little bit more easy to disguise. And we'll talk about all of the different disguises in a moment. But first, let's figure out exactly what an arpeggio is, because an arpeggio is like a scale. But it's a different kind of pattern, right? A scale pattern, we pick our most important note, our tonic, in this case, let's say G, and we use our key signature, which in this case has an F sharp, and we play every single note all the way up until the next G, right? And an arpeggio, we still take that same note and we base it as our most important note. But instead of playing every single note in the key signature until we get to the next G, we're going to build a snow person instead. And every basic generic snow person has 3 different sections. And so every basic arpeggio is going to have 3 notes in it. And we're going to start on G. And so our arpeggio is going to be based on G, our bottom section of our snow person. And that gives us G, B, and D. And the easiest way to remember that is to think about cookies baking in the oven. How do you know when they're done? They are golden brown and delicious. G, B, and D. And then put a G on top for good measure. But for all of our arpeggios, come up with something silly to remember them with. My personal favorite happens to be the one built on B, where I like to remember it by Burritos Don't Fly. But that's a different day. Today, we're starting with golden brown and delicious, our G arpeggio. Now, when they're all stacked up like a snow person, that's technically a chord, and we'll get to those on another day. When we do an arpeggio, we're going to play them all one at a time. We're going to spread our snow person out and give ourselves our G, our B, and our D. And sometimes we find arpeggios spelled straight out like this in melodies. And anyone who's gotten through all of the first Suzuki book knows that Bach's second minuet starts with this exact arpeggio. Right? And then again. And then we throw in some musical broccoli for fun. But not every arpeggio has to be spelled out exactly the way that we practice them or the way that they stack into a perfect little snow person. Sometimes composers decide to get a little bit crazy with things and spell their arpeggios out of order. But even if they're spelled and stretched out in a way that they don't stack up neatly into a snow person, even if maybe we put a D up here and then went to a G, or maybe we went down to this D after, they're still arpeggios, even if they're stretched out differently. And Dvorak does this in his 8th symphony in the first movement in the viola part. There's a whole bunch of arpeggios, and they're all stretched out and spelled out of order, and they're given a wide range of dynamics and accents and sforzandos because they're there not as the melody, but to provide a bunch of excitement for the melody to help the music move forward. And so I'm going to play a little bit of this for you, and you'll notice that, yes, a lot of this is based on our golden brown and delicious, but it's a slightly different flavor because we're going to use B flats and make it a G minor arpeggio instead. And now an extra tall 4-note snow person. And so all of those snow people were spelled out of order, and then some got extra tall, but they were all still arpeggios used to build a little bit of excitement. So now we've seen arpeggios used as part of a melody. We've seen arpeggios used to generate excitement for a melody. But can arpeggios build an entire piece? Yes, they absolutely can. And maybe they'll be spelled the same way that they'd be stacked up for a snow person. Maybe they'll be a little bit stretched out. But in this case, we're going to use a piece that's all arpeggios, and most of them are going to be stretched out. We're going to use it to sound like music in another world. And it goes on and on like this, sounding like we're off somewhere else. So I really meant it when I said arpeggios can disguise themselves everywhere. They could be little blips in the middle of melodies. They can be the powerhouse of a piece underneath the melody. They could be the entire piece themselves. So next time you're practicing your musical broccoli, add in a little bit of cauliflower.